Okay, so greetings. This is a short sharing. Someone asked me what I thought of Dr. Sebi. So I'm a lifelong learner. I really enjoy learning, and there's so many gifted elders I've been exposed to. I have never met Dr. Sebi personally, but I'll say this: one of the things that really stood out about Dr. Sebi was his common sense. He didn't really seem to be so preoccupied with people, what people thought about him, and I think that's what made him a trailblazer. I will say this: although we have some elders that are very gifted and wonderful, and we look to those people as is natural in our community for leadership and for the wisdom that they've gained over the years that they're passing down, especially when it comes to any kind of physical health, emotional health, mental health. In Sebi's case in particular, his wisdom around herbs and food. I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of not testing things out on our own and not using our common sense. So I'll say this: I think that any elder, any human being, just any elder worth their salt would want us to use our common sense. I would always, there are things that I've raised, values I've raised my son with, but ultimately, he'll have to go out there and use his own common sense. And there's some things that you're going to test out. So I think any elder, I've been around several. Um, One in particular has been a mentor. Again, I don't know Dr. Sebi personally. And, I've looked through his charts. There's a lot of valuable information that this brother had. And what really stood out to me was his common sense. And he didn't appear to, he didn't come across as being so hung up on any one particular group and any particular camp. He was a free thinker. So I think it's interesting that he was a free thinker, but we have a tendency to follow leaders religiously. And so it's almost like we replaced, the quote unquote white Jesus on the cross, which many of us, say like we never questioned it when we were little, or maybe some of us did. But we seem to have replaced Christianity with some of our leaders, and then we tend to forget or disconnect from the fact that these are flawed human beings. Even human beings will tell you, I'm a flawed human being. There are a lot of things that they were testing out and experimenting with, but there's a lot of wisdom that they left us. So I really enjoy listening to Dr. Sebi. It's a lot of information that I've referred to. He's not the only one. We have a collective of elders. So especially more at this point than ever. It's always been, but it only gets more refined. I don't think my elders would want me to follow something blindly. For example, if I couldn't get to, let's say, wheatgrass, then I eat nothing. I don't think they would want me to starve myself. I just think they would want us to use our common sense. I think that's the best tribute we can give to elders, is to add something on. There are new things for us to discover for the next generation to add on. So I don't think it's about following somebody blindly, like there's a need to put people, human beings, up as if they're a religious leader. And a lot of our culture has become like a religion, and I get it because many are trying to find validation where we haven't received any as a collective in society. And on another note, it's not going to come unless we validate ourselves. But I don't think any of the elders that I've come across would want me to not use my common my common sense. At the end of the day, it's about your common sense, your experience, and your results. And I take the best and leave the rest. There's a lot of Pentecostal and Christian religion in my family. And although I realized as a young person that I saw a lot of contradictions in the church, or folks that would go and pray all day. I didn't know a word for fat or obesity as a child, but I did see a tendency for many of the women. I wonder why they were so huge. And then I realized later, I saw my grandmother had diabetes. There were a lot of things with common sense that was inherent in me that I put two and two together. So I realized very early that I saw a connection with food and medicating, and that it was socially acceptable for women, many women, but not limited to women, to numb out with food rather than drugs. We can medicate on many levels. So that was through inherent common sense, and we all have common sense. Our elders, they have gifts. You have gifts too. And when you come into these groups and these cults, one of the things that you wind up, they make you feel very insecure and second guess yourself if you're not thinking. And this is twisted because the context in cults changes all the time. If you're not just thinking for the group, and after a while, you don't think anything for yourself. It's looked at as a negative, But the leader and the elder have gifts, and you come with your own unique set of gifts. And sometimes you're even shamed or put down um, if you speak out or you show your your gifts or whatever the thing is that is your calling. If I think of my grandparents in the church, I remember my great grandmother having us all get on our knees and to saying thank you Jesus, thank you Jesus, thank you Jesus. I'm a little girl and I'm thinking it's still dark outside. I'm like, what the heck are we doing this for? Years later, I met a woman who was very into I don't even know if I would say Christianity, but into the ways of Christ. And she said something aside from looking at it from a religious perspective. And I invite people to reframe your narrative. And what I mean by that is take the best and leave the rest. So, in terms of universal truth, she said, oh, that's called tarrying. I had never heard the word before, tarrying. And I do remember them talking about prayer warriors. So, many of the older women were prayer warriors. But I remember reframing the narrative in my head that they would just say, if you will, mantras or affirmations of just saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I remember taking from that conversation that this spiritual auntie had said to me. She told me about tarot. She said, "Oh, you had prayer warriors in your family." She took something that I could have taken as a negative and not wanting to be associated with the uh, the lack of the waiting on the Lord to do something, and my negative, me just feeling like Christianity didn't work for our folks. And she helped inspire me to reframe it in terms of what was the principle, what was the strength that I could take away from that. And that was tarrying and just sometimes just going into thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you can really shift your mood and your thinking. So I say that to say the lesson there was taking something that I got that could have been a negative and reframe it. If you didn't know your father, I didn't know my father. I didn't have my father around me my whole life, but I realized, as another elder told me, go back and think of what the gifts were that your mother and your father gave to you, even if you didn't know them. And my godfather said to me, you're like a cake. Half your ingredients of your mother and half your ingredients of your father. If you hate either one of them, you're going to cut off your power. Now, years ago, I didn't totally know what he meant, but over the years, I always reasoned um, with that simple gem he gave me. And I thought about, well, what did my father give me? And I was thinking he had the good sense to come and get me and plop me next to my grandma. And that was one of the greatest gifts he could have given me. So that's now how my reference for my experience with my father, that's the best of what he gave me was my grandma. If I think of my mom is a very sweet person. She's very generous. She's very open to different foods and cultures, and she can season some food. So just as somebody giving me that simple, practical gem, it helped me to reframe um, a narrative. And I think it's very easy for us to fall into narratives that others have created for us, and it can really deplete us in terms of being able to see possibilities, to see, for example, the possibilities that there are and the resources we have access to in the United States. Even though it's cold, there are plenty of resources that are there. There's Wi-Fi, there's libraries, there's lots of free courses, there's all kinds of educational opportunities. So, in terms of reframing the narrative, you know, someone could say, oh, part of my experience is from the quote unquote ghetto. That can be so loaded. If I think of, for example, my one of my aunties, she would get down for the crown. She didn't allow me to have somebody chase me upstairs. She told me, you get downstairs, you don't let somebody chase you upstairs. I'm very respectful, but when it's time to use common sense to stand up and defend yourself, those are gifts I have from that particular chapter of my life. I'm not limited to that. It's a language, it's a lingo, it's a gift. If I need to pull out those superpowers to defend myself or to defend young people or defend my child, I pull on those things. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's really, at least I'm observing, or I invite people to rewrite the narrative so that you see possibilities and to look at the glass half full. I'm not sharing this in the context of ignore what is actually happening. But in terms of what is there that we can do from where we are with what we have, the experience that I had in that cult was a butt kicker. It's such a hard lesson. But as I marinate on it, how was I vulnerable? It's not about me beating up on myself. It's definitely about being fully responsible so that I learn from it and that I can move on. And I take the best of those gems that I've learned from that situation in terms of being responsible, speaking up, cross-referencing folks. Even if I couldn't find anything on this man on the internet, definitely there were things in terms of his character that rubbed me the right way. There was nothing wrong with the fruits and vegetables in the community, but there were some things that were off. So what I can share with folks is put your values on a pedestal more than you put people on the pedestal, because we'll get attacked. Somebody might I don't need people to get attached to me. I'm just sharing I'm another human being. These elders, they're human beings. They're flawed human beings like everybody else. And I've observed it's a gross error to put your life into other people's hands, because you get more that you had banked on. And we do have the capacity to solve problems for ourselves. There's nothing wrong with seeking wisdom, but ultimately, the responsibility for your life and your decisions are on you. If you make children, if you expose yourself to something, you deplete your resources. If you didn't save, if you didn't research, if you didn't cross-reference, you are going to have to deal with you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your choices. There's no running from that. Elders and gurus and these groups are not going to shield you from that. There's the illusion that you don't have to deal, that you can run from these things. You can run from emotional and mental pain. When we avoid things, they're still waiting for you. The bills will be waiting for you, accumulating interest. The parts of yourself that you didn't choose to cultivate, the things that you were scared of that you can take on, they're still right there, waiting for you. So the original point, when somebody asked me about Dr. Sebi, um, I would say the wealth of knowledge, again, the thing that stood out to me the most was he wasn't conventional. He was very, very comfortable in his own skin and speaking out and not just going along with the group because of what the group was doing. I think that's one of the biggest things that stood out to me. And a lot of the things he said, sometimes we follow these things like, bananas are hybrid or they're not hybrid, eat quinoa, we are to use our common sense. I feel very confident that my elders and I want to use my common sense and my critical thinking, because that's what he did. That's what they do, is use their common sense. So hopefully that answers. That's what my thoughts are on Dr. Sebi. And that applies to any elder or any person you look up to that's giving you wisdom and information. That wisdom and information and those barometers, that litmus test, those principles apply to them too. You don't not apply the same litmus test to the elder that's giving you the information. That's a big way of how we're being scammed, because quite often the con artists will tell you to watch out for other con artists, but then it doesn't occur to you to look out for the person that's giving you the information, right? So yeah, it just doesn't occur to you. Why would this person give all this information and turn around and do the same thing? As Joseph Robinson quoted Hitler, he said, tell a lie and make the lie so big that people would never think that somebody would tell a lie like that. In essence, the best place to hide something is right in front of folks' face. And it sounds like it's so simple, but quite often we're not really conditioned, and we haven't exercised the muscles of critical thinking. That's on a society basis, as a group and as a collective. So hopefully that can be useful to someone.